Well, in this last session of this morning's conference, I'm pleased to introduce Mr. Werner Hoyer, the President of the European Investment Bank, who will speak to us on investing in Europe. Mr. Hoyer's speech will be followed by a one-on-one discussion with Klaus-Dieter Frankenberger, the foreign editor of the Frankfurter Allgemeine Zeitung. The discussion will be followed by a question and answer session. I'll leave the floor to you. Thank you.
Thank you. Buongiorno. I have the great pleasure to chair this session, which will be the last session before lunch. I promise you this will be fascinating and thrilling, so that you are really prepared for your meal. I just wanted to say at the outset a word of gratitude. The organization I represent is a knowledge partner to this event. We are very proud to be here, represented and contributing to a marvelous debate, a necessary debate in this wonderful city of Florence and in this magnificent building, Palazzo Vecchio. Building a people's Europe, this is the main theme of today's event, and this theme has many aspects and dimensions: political, value, democratic, but it also has a very physical dimension, so to speak, the nuts and bolts of Europe. And we don't have anyone better to explain to us what this is all about than my good friend Werner Hoyer. Werner, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Klaus-Dieter. Ladies and gentlemen, Excellencies, it's a great privilege and honor for me to be here and to discuss with you, or to participate in this debate about the State of the Union. A call to all Europeans, a call for a new renaissance, as one can say, in this city more than anywhere else. Think of this beautiful city back those days when the greatest minds of Europe gathered as pioneers to create wonderful works of art, to expand the boundaries of philosophy, politics, ethics, theology, to develop commercial empires and great intellectual realms which shape the world we live in today. These intellectual pioneers could have taken a negative view of the world at that time. Just think of war and plague and famine that dominated the previous centuries. Instead, they took a leap of faith. Those pioneers neither retreated nor conceded to history's dark march. They found a new path, uncovering wonders as they advanced on their route. Let me congratulate the European University Institute for choosing this year's theme, Building a People's Europe. Rightly putting the European citizen at the heart of the debate, and our work, indeed, also at the EU Bank, is to contribute to creating jobs, to building bridges, to securing a better future for all of us. Man is the measure, and our measure must be tangible, better lives for all citizens of Europe. This year, we celebrated the 60th anniversary of the Treaty of Rome, marking the genesis of the European Union and also the signature of the founding documents of the European Investment Bank, the EU Bank. Let us reflect on the tremendous achievements of European integration, and I will only mention a few because Jean-Claude Juncker did it so perfectly well this morning already. Consider the transformations in the last 20 years alone: integration of Eastern Europe, the euro, the rapid response to the financial crisis, measures such as the banking union. And Europe, the European Union, lives in peace, secures stability, and ensures astonishing freedoms. Just think of the freedom of movement we are all enjoying today. 1.7 million of our citizens are commuting from one country to another every day, and hundreds of millions travel easily for business or pleasure across borders which confined us for centuries. We do also see challenges we are facing in Europe, yet challenges go hand in hand with opportunities, and we must look for solutions, look forward, and advance relentlessly. A certain sense of uncertainty has loomed over us since the beginning of the financial crisis. The initial uncertainty was economic, but over time it spread to policy and politics, reaching the very heart of our societal debates. how to reach the balance between openness, multilateralism, and ensure security, confidence. Investment is one of the cornerstones of the solution because investment requires and inspires confidence at the same time. And that brings me to the solutions we are implementing at the EU Bank for almost 60 years now, since our first operations. We are the only bank owned by all 28 member states of the Union, representing and promoting their policy priorities. And with a balance sheet of around 570 billion euros, we are by far the largest multilateral lender and borrower in the world. The EU Bank is the financial arm of the European Union. We finance bridges, we design new financing instruments, we support SMEs, we keep the dialogue with all European institutions and member states to find ways to address, and that's the key, market gaps, and mobilize investments, and mobilize private sector money, because the EU Bank is a crowding-in bank. Whenever you hear about complaints that we're crowding out the private sector banks, don't worry. We know our job is mobilize money for public purposes from the private sector. Considering the substantial investment gaps we are facing in Europe compared to our competitors around the world, the difficult task we have here is to find ways to maximize the efficiency and effectiveness of available public resources and to act now. And this is the core of the Juncker plan, Jean-Claude Juncker referred to this morning. When he placed his bid for becoming president of the European Commission 3 years ago, he happened to know our bank inside out for decades. As a felt 100 years of Prime Minister, or Finance Minister of Luxembourg, he knows the Luxembourg-based EU Bank very well. And he came to us before the decisions were on the Commission presidency were taken and asked us, what is your analysis? What is your advice to restart the economic engine after the financial crisis, the second wave of the financial crisis, as a matter of fact? And we said, well, the best thing is to base everything you propose on a solid analysis. We gave it to him. And in that solid analysis, we identified an enormous investment gap in the European Union. How do you measure an investment gap? Well, the only way we could do it was to take the targets, the objectives set by the European Council in the last couple of years and compare these targets with the figures of funds provided in public budgets and corporate budgets until 2020 in order to reach these targets. And if you do that, you arrive at astonishing and horrifying costs. You find that in order to reach the objectives we have set in the field of energy efficiency and renewable energies and energy security, you find a gap in investment of 100 billion euros per year. If you compare the objectives of the European Council when it comes to the upgrading of transport networks to reduce congestion costs and trade bottlenecks, you arrive at a sum of roughly 80 billion euros per year. If you look at the digital agenda in the European Union, if we want to reach our targets in the digital agenda, we are missing 65 billion euros per year until 2020. And if you look at state-of-the-art education facilities, we better talk about a 3-digit billion number if we want to meet our standards. Rehabilitation of environmental services and ensure water security in face of climate change requires another 90 million per year. And if we want to achieve finally the big target of R&D investments of 3% of GDP by 2020, we'll have to invest 130 billion euros per year, in addition to what we have planned in the public and corporate budgets. So all in all, this brings you to an investment gap of roughly 700 billion euros per year. Now, how can we fix that? Also taking into consideration that since we identified these gaps, we have happily signed up to the Sustainable Development Goals of the United Nations 2 years ago. And 1.5 years ago, we happily brought in our contribution to signing the deal in Paris on COP21, on the climate change agenda. Well, this of course increases the investment gap in Europe. If we want to achieve these objectives, and if we want to reduce or even one day close the investment gap and be competitive again with our colleagues in Asia, in North America, and other places in the world who have not been inward looking for the last 10 years since the beginning of the financial crisis as we have been, then we can forget about filling these gaps with public money only. Our budgets will never suffice to bring about the necessary funds to fill these investment gaps. And it is not necessary, because in these times, money is abundantly available. We are living in a time of zero interest rates or negative interest rates. So liquidity is not the problem. The insurers, the pension funds, they are swimming in money. They are desperate to find places where they can place their funds over the next couple of years with at least a minimum of return. So liquidity is not the problem. So why does then the money not flow into the projects which are obviously available? We get many proposals for projects which are so lousy that we don't even consider them, but there is enough in good projects that are on the market. Why does the money not go there? Because obviously uncertainty, market barriers, regulatory barriers, or risk aversion leads investors to not go into these fields of activity. So what the Juncker plan did, and this is the revolutionary idea behind Juncker's plan, was to say, let us shift budgetary resources from grants and subsidies to guarantees and loans. This is the entire trick of the Juncker plan. The European Parliament, Council, and Commission were ready to shift 16 billion euros of budget money from subsidies to guarantees. This is basically it. We, as a bank, put another 5 billion in cash to it, so we have a budget buffer of, a guarantee buffer of 21 billion euros. And if you assume that that can help to stimulate investment at a considerable pace, then you arrive at the multiplication of 21 billion by 15. 15 was the ambition we had set for ourselves to multiply by 15, and we arrive at the 315 billion Mr. Juncker has been talking about at that time. And I can tell you that paradigm change in the use of the budget, or as Kristalina Georgieva, then the Vice President of the Commission and Commissioner for the Budget, said, better spending, better use of scarce financial resources, led to the fact that I can report to you today that after roughly 50% of the time we are given for the Juncker plan, 58% of the objectives have been reached. So as Mr. Gualtieri has reported to you before in the last panel, the Juncker plan works, and I'm confident that at the end of the 3-year period it will have worked, and we will then continue until the end of the budgetary period and go from 315 to roughly 500 billion euros and on. So this is the basic idea of the Juncker plan, and it is important to be aware that this is not a miracle. This is not rocket science. This is a simple reallocation of budgetary resources. And I must say I've been involved in European budgetary affairs for the last 30 years in one capacity or the other, and I've always dreamt of finding a good solution for shifting money from subsidies to better use. And this is happening here now. And I tell you that in the next couple of years, we will need the courage to do these shifts in other fields of policy as well. We will need it in agriculture. We will need it in transport. We will need it also in our external relations, and I'll come back to that in a minute, because also there our objectives are so grand and important and challenging that we will not be able to do it with grants and subsidies alone. Ladies and gentlemen, the areas where the bank is active are, of course, very widespread. I will not go into each and every detail, but it goes without saying that innovation, research, development, and education is at the core of the matter, in particular when it comes to the interests of the citizens. It goes without saying that the financing of SMEs in Europe is suffering, and we almost bring about 30% of our annual lending to the SMEs of this continent, and innovation, skills and jobs, youth unemployment, the fight against youth unemployment, that is at the center of our activities. But we can also get quite concrete when it comes, for instance, to the countries that are not benefiting so much from the overall positive situation of Europe. Take, for instance, the situation we approached in Greece, where we set up a trade finance facility that will benefit Greek SMEs and mid-caps, will enable Greek banks to provide trade and export finance services to Greek SMEs and mid-caps at a time when no commercial lines with private banks are available. By the way, this bank, on behalf of the European Union, was in Greece before the crisis. It was then the only one who stayed within the crisis, during the crisis in Greece, and we are, of course, active in Greece after the crisis, and now we even changed the business model a little bit for Greece because we believe we must move closer to the clients. One element of the Juncker plan should be mentioned here because FC, the Juncker plan, has changed the DNA of our bank. The important thing is that with the Juncker plan, we were able to do two things. On the one hand, increase the riskier lending of the bank from roughly 4 to 5 billion euros per year to 20 to 25 billion euros a year. This is significant. There are projects where you can say, okay, they could have been financed before the Juncker plan as well. Yes, but overall only up to a maximum of 5 billion euros. Now we're going to a maximum of 25 billion euros. That's a quantitative and qualitative difference. And second thing, and that needs to be kept in mind, 2/3 of the companies we work with in the context of the Juncker plan are new clients to the bank. So the bank has reached out to completely new clientele with the Juncker plan, and that is something I consider a success. You have probably heard that there are critical points. Additionality is one of them, which I just mentioned. The other one is a question of regional distribution. But to be honest, I think we should be quite open-minded and see where most of the money has gone. Most of the money with the Juncker plan has gone per capita, of course, gone to the countries of Eastern, Central, and Southeastern Europe, and that is exactly where it was needed most. Ladies and gentlemen, let me, before I need to conclude, unfortunately, say one word about activities outside the European Union, because we are in the country that has borne the brunt of migration for many years, when people in the rest of Europe had closed the eyes before the challenge of migration in Europe. And Jean-Claude Juncker referred to this morning very eloquently. Ladies and gentlemen, our political leaders have now found out that we will not serve the interests of the European Union by overlooking the challenges outside the European Union. And also there, when it comes to the root causes of migration, for instance, the question of investment will be necessary. And there, the next paradigm change in the use of budgets is necessary, because also the challenges in development we will be able to meet only if we make better use of budgets. And that means we need something like the Juncker plan for activities outside the European Union. We are presently spending roughly 8 billion on lending outside the European Union, in particular in the context of the situation with migration. We must now be sure that we focus and coordinate better, because our political leaders are sometimes confused. They hear about the economic resilience initiative of the EU Bank, which is already working on the ground in the countries of the northern rim of Africa or the southern rim of the Mediterranean and in the Western Balkans. We are preparing together with the European Commission, or they are preparing together with us, the external investment plan of the European Union. And of course, the EU Bank has the most effective mandate of the European external dimension. That's the external lending mandate, where we multiply by a factor of 30 to 40 every euro that is entrusted to the external activities of the EU Bank. So, ladies and gentlemen, this is a very dynamic situation for the bank and for the European Union at a time when multilateralism, cooperative approaches are put into question, when people even think they should leave the Union. I think we should encourage those who do this work, who can function, who can be successful, only if we do it in a cooperative spirit and with a multilateral approach. And I thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you, Herr Heuer, for this very forceful presentation. I've known Mr. Hoyer since he was a key foreign policy maker both in Bonn and Berlin, and I'm glad to learn that he's also a very forceful president of a multilateral lending institution. You have given us a lot of numbers, and the investment gap, as you say, is 700 billion per year. You basically described the Juncker plan as a success story, which already has met a lot of its objectives and goals. If you look a little bit back, I'm sure not every member state was happy when Mr. Juncker laid out his proposal at the time. And what were the objections by the states?
The objection was, are we going to do more of the same? And it was necessary to convince the political leaders that this is a different approach. The easiest solution at that time would have been to do what we had done 4 years before, and that is go for a capital increase of the bank. That would have expanded our lending volume as well. But other than at the time of the capital increase 3 years ago, as I outlined before, capital shortage was not the problem. The problem was addressing good projects with people who are ready to overcome their risk aversion. And at the same time, make sure that the regulatory barriers are disappearing as well. So I always insist the Juncker plan consists of 3 parts. The European Fund for Strategic Investment, this, let's say, guarantee facility, but also the increase in advisory capacity, both technological and financial, we provide for our customers. And thirdly, the job that is particularly done by Mr. Timmermans in the Commission and in the member states themselves, remove artificial barriers to investment. These artificial barriers are abundantly available in the European Union, and we must dynamize the market also by being a little bit more flexible in this respect. And so at that, we managed at that time to overcome these concerns, and I believe most member states are now quite happy. They are so happy that they're sometimes criticizing us that they don't get enough of the cake, and that shows obviously there is a need for this program and a big appetite.
And you are happy and convinced that the projects that are identified for you to contribute to are worthwhile? Are they strategic in nature?
I believe they are, but of course, if you take SME financing, it's difficult to say what is strategic here. The strategic dimension here is to support the SME sector, because as we always say, the SMEs are the backbones of our industry in Europe. But in times when even in highly developed countries in the north of Europe, SMEs have the biggest problem to access bank financing, and unfortunately, venture capital financing in Europe is completely underdeveloped, and our subsidiary, the European Investment Fund, is working at that as well. Then it shows that even there, it is a question of doing more, but in a different way, and I think we have succeeded in doing so.
Yeah. Some critics say, the EU does not enjoy enough legitimacy and credibility because of a lack of performance. In your judgment, what you do, is it necessary, imperative to enhancing the legitimacy of the EU as the investment arm of the Union?
I think in general, we are of course seeing this disconnect of the people from their political leaders sometimes, and obviously we have also to explain better what we are doing. When I came to the bank 5.5 years ago, I was said every day, the bank is not in the papers is a good day. The bank has worked well with that philosophy for 55 years, but in these times, we need to tell the good stories about Europe. And when we provide better health services in the United Kingdom, or better access to finance for Greek SMEs, or if we are able to provide a better environment in Spain or in Denmark, then we must tell the stories. And this is why I believe, as the good news institution of the European integration process, we should be more aggressive in addressing the public with our deeds.
Mentioning the UK, how will the Brexit affect what you do, and the bank in general?
The Brexit will affect us terribly, like it will affect us all terribly. It is a historical mistake of unknown dimensions, in my view. And we all will pay a high price for that. The biggest, the British friends themselves, unfortunately. Well, this is probably unavoidable. It affects us so that we are losing a shareholder who owns 16% of the shares of the bank. And we have to disentangle that one way or the other. Probably there will be some bad surprises for the United Kingdom there as well. because they're not only owning 60% of the capital, but also 60% of the liabilities of the bank. But then the United Kingdom is in the situation that they do not have a Cassa di Depositi e Prestiti in Italy, or KfW in Germany, or CDC in France, or ECO in Spain, or BGK in Poland. They don't have that. So the United Kingdom relies particularly heavily upon EIB, and that will be missed in the United Kingdom. The loan book, the projects in the United Kingdom are excellent, so from that point of view, I regret it very much. Also, because the United Kingdom investment activities helps us in particular to reach our objectives in the fields of climate change, environment, energy efficiency, and innovation. And beyond that, the United Kingdom is a strong partner for development policy. So I hope that at the end of the day, this divorce process will not be so ugly that we will not be able to cooperate in the future, because I believe the United Kingdom will obviously be a friend and an ally of Europe in the future, and we'll have to find a good way. But they have decided to leave the European Union, and that means, according to this Treaty of Rome, or the Treaty of Lisbon nowadays, that they will leave EIB.
Thank you for this moderately pragmatic and, if not optimistic, answer. I think I have to ask you this question. We are 2 days away from an election which is of historic proportion in France. What if Marine Le Pen's, defying all the polls and all the predictions, becomes president of the Republic of France? What would this do to the EU? What would this do to the Franco-German relationship? And what would be the implications are for Germany's role in the, by then, probably rest EU?
I do not invest 1 second in the intellectual exercises of this kind. I hope that if that happens, we have some good advisors in the bank who have been thinking this through and give us advice then. But for the time being, I'm optimistic enough to say that after the terrible year of 2016, with Brexit and production of uncertainty in the United States, we will see, after the positive outcome of the Dutch elections, also a positive outcome of the elections in France, a positive outcome of the elections in the Czech Republic, a positive outcome of the elections in Malta, and then Germany will definitely not get unstable at the end of the year. So 2017 can become a damn good year for Europe again.
Thank you for this optimistic outlook. So I'm sure members in the audience would love to or pose a question to Dr. Hoyer, or who wants to have the floor first? Yes, sir. You in the fourth row. There are roving microphones. Und Sie antworten gleich direkt.
As President of INSME, the International Network for SMEs, I commend your attention for SMEs. But what are you doing to reduce the digital gap among SMEs in Europe? Because 75% of SMEs in Europe are not yet digitalized. And this is something that requires a lot of investment. Second, you mentioned the importance of investing in R&D. By 30 billion, the gap you indicated in 30 billion euros. But in the United States, the Department of Defense is spending every year more than $80 billion for R&D. You don't think that the European ambitions are still too low?
Thank you.
Well, on the digitalization, I clearly identify the problem. I believe that all member states, with a few exceptions, are not ambitious enough when it comes to the digital agenda. And that means that we have to take seriously what has been said by John Kerry when he was still Secretary of State at a UN conference on digitalization 1 year ago. And he said, the access to the fast internet is in our times a human right, and we have to provide it. And if we don't want to have regional or structural shocks in regions where people, for instance, relocate their SMEs because in the valley where they're now producing they don't have a fast internet, then we are missing a big opportunity. So I think our digital obligations go far beyond what we are presently doing, And I would be ready at any moment to discuss with the member states and the European Commission a huge program on an increase in investments into the digital landscape. By the way, when we talk about the digital agenda, we have a tendency, however, to talk about the access of the individual company or a household in the remote areas. That is very important, but that's not the whole story. Our biggest problem in Europe is our lack of capacity in data processing. And we will see an exponential growth in data processing in the next couple of years. Just take autonomous driving, which will definitely come in a couple of years, and that will lead to a multiple need in the speed of digital connections, and therefore we need to invest into these data centers and the digital infrastructure on the higher level as well. On R&D, I fully agree. This is why I support Mr. Juncker's remarks on defense spending this morning. We are getting ridiculous if we have 27, soon 27, separate budgets for defense spending without major coordination. I think what is happening there is completely insufficient. We can get more out of the buck if we do it better together in a better harmonized and structured way. Then I believe it will be easy also to get the private sector interested in participating more in this kind of financing. By the way, we have made 10 years ago, exactly 10 years ago, one big step forward in finding resources, and that was when we issued the first green bonds. The green bond markets, where EIB was the avant-garde, is nowadays a huge international market. The Gates Foundation has set up and built up another empire, that is the financing of vaccines via bond issues. I believe intelligent bond issuances in many fields, from development to maybe in some areas even defense research or security research, can also be an issue that needs to be addressed. And I yesterday spoke at the International Capital Markets Association, and we have been discussing ideas in this direction. I think this has not been fully explored yet.
Thank you. Anyone else? We have a few more minutes. Yes, sir or ma'am?
Thank you. My name is Stefano Poli. I'm a journalist of Italian news agency ANSA. Thank you very much, Mr. Hoyer, for your remarkable speech. As you know better than me, and in Europe there are different different points of view about new investments. To summarize, there are some European leaders, European countries that believe that new investments are very important for Europe, economic Europe, and other countries, other European leaders believe that a strong control on national budget is more important than new investment. Do you think that it will be possible to find a good compromise between these two different points of view? And one more thing, if I can, very quickly. You said that we need a new kind of confidence in Europe to have a new investment. Which kind of confidence you mean, and how can we build this new confidence? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Basically, your question is rather general, and this is why I give you a general answer. I think confidence will only be restored if we all believe in the sustainability of what we are doing. And that then includes both, in my view, much more aggressive and ambitious investment planning or investment activity. I don't talk about central planning, investment activity. At the same time, we need to consolidate our budgets. So the question is not, should we do more investments? Should we spend better, is the question. And I've seen election campaigns where all of a sudden the increase in consumption spending or all kinds of well-intended activities has gone up because you were giving election gifts before the elections. Let's invest in those areas where the investment over the next 5 to 10 years will pay itself off. Then we are on a good track. And for that, but I'm not a finance minister, I would be ready to go into public debt. But only then, if I go into investments which contribute to Europe's productivity and competitiveness. Because one thing is for sure, we have lost in the last 10 years considerably in productivity growth and therefore in competitiveness. And I think we are presently still sitting on an island where we have not realized that the water is rising. And if we don't act quickly, like with climate change, we will soon be underwater. And as far as competitiveness is concerned, Europe has lost and not caught up since the beginning of the financial crisis. We are back to growth levels or growth rates, but the return of growth rates is much slower than after any crisis we ever had in the European Union. So therefore, where do we need to spend more is the question, not whether we should spend more.
I'm afraid we need to leave it where we are. Werner Hoyer, this is the very final question, and this is actually a cheapy one for you. The previous panel addressed the question of ever closer union. Now, you are a Europeanist at heart. I've known this. Is ever closer union a thing of the past, or is still this a compass for the future?
This is a very personal answer I can give you only, and that is I still believe in the idea of a ever closer union. I believe that we have to rebalance always the two big principles of the European integration process. By the way, they are also the big principles of the Catholic Church and the liberalism, interestingly enough, and that is the balance between subsidiarity and solidarity. And we must not overlook any of these two parts of the equation. And therefore, I believe that there are areas where we urgently need to integrate more deeply. Only 50% of Europe's GDP is produced and distributed along the rules of the internal market. On the other hand, we all know examples where European interference or national interference or regional interference into local affairs goes much too far in the Union. So this rebalancing must take place. But I think I would expect from convinced Europeans that they also are adhering to a principle which has served us very well and will serve us in the future as well, if we don't want to be a victim of globalization, but a shaper of the globalization process.
Thank you. Please join me in thanking Dr. Hoyer for what I think was a very powerful presentation.
Thank you very much. Vielen Dank.
Enjoy your lunch.
Hoppala.
Oh, yeah.
Lass es.